I had paid for the cake. I had paid for the flowers. I had paid for the dress. I had paid for the venue, the photographer, the rehearsal dinner, and the open bar. The total across 11 months of careful invoices, deposits, and final payments was just under $64,000. And on the morning of the wedding, while I was standing in the hotel lobby in the new dress I had bought for the occasion, my son walked across the marble floor and asked me, very quietly, not to come inside. By Monday morning, I had made one phone call from my hotel room. By Friday, the wedding gift I had been planning to give them the gift they did not yet know about had been redirected to someone else entirely. Here is what actually happened. My name is Susan. I am 70 years old. My husband Charles died in 2019. We had been married for 45 years. He had been a structural engineer for 38 of those years. He had retired in 2014 with a pension that paid better than either of us had expected. A paid-off Tudor-style house in a quiet neighborhood outside Indianapolis. And the steady habit of telling me, on the first Saturday of every month, Susan, this is what we have, and this is what we are going to do with it. Charles had been a planner. He had also, in the year before he died, set aside a substantial gift for our son Andrew's eventual wedding. The gift had been $100,000. Charles had placed it in a separate account, with my name on it, with the understanding that I would give it to Andrew on his wedding day, whenever and to whomever that might be. Susan. The boy is 37. He will marry someone someday. When he does, that account is theirs. Charles had died in February of 2019. Andrew had not yet been engaged at the time of Charles's death. He had met Lauren 3 months later, in May of 2019. He had married her, or had attempted to marry her 5 years later, in September of 2024. The $100,000 had been sitting in the account that whole time. The story I am about to tell you is the story of what happened to it. I had liked Lauren initially. I had liked her because she was warm. She was a marketing executive at a regional firm. She had been 34 when Andrew met her. She had brown hair she wore in a careful bob, a small dimple in her left cheek when she smiled, and the kind of polite, firm handshake that women learn in business schools that did not exist when I was young. She had been kind to me at first. She had sent me flowers on the first anniversary of Charles's death. She had remembered my birthday in 2020 and 2021. She had complimented the small framed photograph of Charles and me on our 40th anniversary that hung in my hallway. She had called me. In October of 2021, when I was hospitalized briefly for an irregular heartbeat, and had asked whether she could drive up from Cincinnati to stay with me. I had declined the offer politely. I had not actually needed her. I had been touched that she had asked. I had told myself at the time that Andrew had chosen well. I want to be honest about something. I had thought, for the first 2 years of their relationship, that Lauren was the best thing that had happened to my son. Andrew had been a quiet man since his early 30s, a software engineer who worked too much, dated too little, and had not quite figured out, by the age of 37, what he wanted his adult life to look like. Lauren had brought something into his life that Andrew had not known he was missing. He had laughed more. He had taken vacations. He had bought a small house in Cincinnati in 2022 with the help of a down payment gift I had given him from Charles's life insurance. I had been happy to give the down payment gift. I had not yet noticed, at the time, that the gift had not been formally thanked by Lauren in any meaningful way. The thank you note had come from Andrew. It had been brief. It had been kind. There had been no card from Lauren. I had told myself, at the time, that thank you notes were a generational habit, and that younger women simply did not write them anymore. I had been wrong about that. Younger women still write them, when they want to. Lauren simply had not wanted to. I would learn what she had wanted over the course of the next 2 years. In October of 2023, Andrew had called me. He had told me he had proposed to Lauren the previous weekend. He had told me she had said yes. I had cried on the phone. I had cried because I had loved my son for 37 years, and because his father had died without seeing him propose to anyone, and because Charles had set aside $100,000 in 2018 inches, the careful certainty that someday a phone call exactly like this one would come. I had told Andrew about the account. I had told him that his father had wanted them to have it, that the 100,000 was the wedding gift, that it had been waiting for him since 2018. He had been quiet for a long moment. He had said, "Mom, Dad, set that aside in 2018. I had said, "Yes, sweetheart, the fall of 2018, about 4 months before he was diagnosed." He had said, very softly, "Mom, Dad knew, didn't he? He knew, then." I had said, "He didn't know about the cancer. He had a feeling, sweetheart. He wanted you to be taken care of." He had cried. He had thanked me. He had said he would tell Lauren that night. We had hung up. I had thought, at the time, that the wedding would be a small one. Andrew and Lauren had both been in their late 30s by that point. They were not the kind of couple, I had assumed, who would want a large production. I had imagined a 60-person ceremony in a small chapel, a modest reception at a restaurant downtown, perhaps a honeymoon to Italy or the Maine coast. I had imagined wrong. I had imagined wrong because Lauren, once she had learned about the $100,000, had begun very quickly to imagine differently. Lauren called me in early November of 2023. She used the bright voice she used for things she had already decided I would agree to. "Susan Andrew told me about the gift. Susan, I cannot tell you how grateful I am, how grateful we are. Charles is just what a man he was, to do that for us." I had said, "Sweetheart, Charles would have loved you. I know he would have." She had said, "Susan, listen," I was thinking. "With the gift, we could really do something special, something we'll remember forever." I was thinking, Andrew and I were thinking we could maybe do a slightly bigger wedding than we had originally planned, just to honor, Charles's gift. To do it justice. What do you think? I had paused. I had noticed slightly bigger. I had noticed to do it justice. I had noticed the speed with which Lauren had moved. In 24 hours, from a small October wedding to a slightly bigger one to honor Charles. I had said, "Sweetheart, the gift is for the two of you to use however you want." Charles did not set aside that money to fund a specific kind of wedding. He set it aside to be a gift. You and Andrew can use it for anything: a wedding, a down payment on a bigger house, a honeymoon, a small trust for your eventual children. It is yours to decide, she had said. "Oh, Susan, that's so generous. We've actually been talking, and we think we want to put it all into the wedding. We want it to be the day we never forget. I hope that's okay." I had said, "It is your money to spend, sweetheart. Spend it however you like." She had said, "Susan, thank you. Thank you so much. I love you." I had noticed that this was the first time Lauren had ever said, "I love you" to me. I had noticed that the "I love you" had arrived 24 hours after she had learned about the $100,000. I had not said, "I love you" back. I had said, "Take care, sweetheart. Tell Andrew I'm happy for you both." We had hung up. That phone call had been November 4th, 2023. The wedding had been scheduled for September 7th, 2024. In the 11 months between those two dates, I had paid for a great many things. I want to give you the itemized list, because the itemized list matters. The cake had been baked by a small bakery in Cincinnati, owned by a woman Lauren had attended high school with. The cake had been a 4-tier almond and raspberry cake with edible gold leaf. Cost, $1,900. I had paid the deposit in February of 2024 and the balance in August. The flowers had been arranged by a florist in Indianapolis, whose work Lauren had seen on Instagram. The flowers had included 62 centerpieces, 18 bridal party arrangements, a custom altar arch covered in white peonies, and 400 individual rose stems for the church. Cost $11,200. I had paid the deposit in March and the balance 2 weeks before the wedding. The dress had been designed by a small bridal boutique in Chicago that Lauren had flown to twice for fittings. The dress had been a custom-made silk gown with hand-beaded bodice work and a 6-foot cathedral train. Cost $8,700. I had paid the deposit in February and the balance in June. The venue had been a historic ballroom downtown that could seat 240 for dinner. Cost, including the deposit, the venue fee, the chairs and linens, the dance floor, and the bar setup, $19,400. I had paid the deposit in January and the balance in July. The photographer had been a husband and wife team Lauren had wanted because they had photographed a celebrity wedding the previous year. Cost $7,200. I had paid the deposit in April and the balance in August. The rehearsal dinner had been at a private dining room at a French restaurant downtown. Cost, including the meal for 42 guests, the wine pairing, and the gratuity, $6,300. I had paid the deposit in June and the balance 2 days before the wedding. The open bar at the reception had been a premium open bar that included top-shelf liquor, signature cocktails, and a champagne tower. Cost $7,700. I had paid the deposit in March and the balance in August. There had also been smaller items that I had paid for incidentally over the 11 months. The engagement party expenses in December of $2,023, about $1,800. The bridal shower expenses in March of 2024, about $2,200, Lauren's hair and makeup trial in April, $600, and a series of small wedding-related dinners and brunches Lauren and I had attended together throughout 2024 that I had quietly picked up the tab for each time. The total, when I added everything up on a piece of paper at my kitchen table in late August, 3 weeks before the wedding, came to $63,700. Charles had set aside $100,000. Lauren had spent through me $63,700 of it. I had not yet given them the remaining $36,300. The remaining money had been earmarked, in my own mind, as the wedding day gift, the envelope. I would hand them at the reception, with a card from me, as a wedding present in the traditional sense, a check for $36,300. I had not yet told them about it. I had been planning to surprise them. I would, eventually, surprise them, but not in the way I had been planning. I had also, over the 11 months, begun to notice that Lauren had stopped being warm to me. It had been gradual. In November of 2023, immediately after the engagement, she had been warm. Phone calls every 2 weeks. Invitations to come down to Cincinnati for the weekend. By February of 2024, the phone calls had become monthly. By April, they had become every 6 weeks. By July, the phone calls had stopped entirely. Lauren had been too busy with wedding planning. Susan, you understand. When I had asked Andrew in July whether everything was all right between Lauren and me, he had said, "Mom, of course everything is fine. She's just stressed. The wedding is huge." I had accepted that. I had accepted it because the wedding was huge. I had been writing checks for 9 months. I had assumed the stress was the cause of the silence. In August, 3 weeks before the wedding, I had called Lauren to ask whether I should bring anything specific to the rehearsal dinner. The rehearsal dinner had been Friday night. The wedding had been Saturday afternoon. I had wanted to know whether there was a particular toast Lauren wanted me to give, a dress code she had decided on, a small gift I should bring. Lauren had not picked up. I had left a voicemail. She had not called back. Andrew had called me 3 days later. He had said, "Mom, Lauren said you called. She's sorry she missed it." "The rehearsal dinner, actually, Mom. Lauren and I have been talking. We were thinking for the rehearsal dinner. We wanted it to be just the wedding party. So just Lauren's parents, my groomsmen, and her bridesmaids. We thought we'd do dinner with you separately, maybe the night before the rehearsal. I had paused. I had said, "Sweetheart, I am paying for the rehearsal dinner. I was planning to be at it." He had said, "Mom, yeah, about that we're going to handle the rehearsal dinner. Lauren's mom wants to pay for it." We told her yes. "So you don't have to worry about it." I had felt something shift, very small, in my chest. I had said, "Andrew, I have already paid for it, the deposit and the balance. The full $6,300 went out 4 months ago." A long silence. He had said, "Mom, oh, I didn't realize. Let me talk to Lauren. Let me figure this out." I had said, "Sweetheart, do not figure it out. The rehearsal dinner is paid for. The reservation is in my name. If you and Lauren want her mother to host it, that is your choice. But the bill has been settled. There is no money to refund. Lauren's mother is not paying for anything that has not already been paid for." He had said, "Mom, okay, I will talk to her. I'm sorry." We had hung up. I had sat at the kitchen table for an hour after that phone call. I had thought about all the small things I had been noticing across 11 months. I had thought about Lauren's mother, a woman named Vivian, whom I had met 3 times at engagement parties and bridal showers, and the careful way Vivian had positioned herself at each event, slightly closer to the center of the wedding plans than I had been positioned. I had thought about the way Vivian had introduced me, at the bridal shower, as Andrew's mother, not as Susan, not as the woman whose late husband made this wedding possible. Simply Andrew's mother, the function, rather than the name. I had thought about the fact that the rehearsal dinner, the dinner I had paid for in full 4 months earlier, had been quietly relabeled, in Lauren and Vivian's planning, as Vivian's gift to the couple. I had thought about the gradual cooling of Lauren's warmth from November to August. I had not yet, at that moment, in late August, understood the full architecture of what was being prepared. I would understand it on the morning of the wedding. It would take me 43 minutes in a hotel lobby to understand it. I want to pause here and ask you something honestly. If you had written $63,700 in checks for your son's wedding over 11 months, paying for the cake, the flowers, the dress, the venue, the photographer, the rehearsal dinner, and the bar, and you had begun, in the final 3 weeks, to suspect that something was being quietly rearranged about your role at the wedding itself, what would you have done? I think a lot of mothers would have called their son and asked, directly, what was happening. I think some would have refused to attend the wedding. I think a brave handful would have walked into the rehearsal dinner the day before and said, in front of Lauren's mother, "I would like a clarification of who is paying for what at this event." I did none of those 3 things. I want to tell you why. I did none of those things because I had been thinking about Charles. Charles had been a structural engineer for 38 years. He had spent his career looking at buildings and asking, what is holding this up? What is the load path? What happens if I remove this piece? He had taught me, over 45 years of marriage, to ask the same kind of questions about people and situations. What was holding up the architecture I had been seeing for 11 months? What was the load path? What happened if I removed myself? I had asked myself those questions in the last week before the wedding. The answers were uncomfortable. What was holding up the architecture was $63,700 of my checks, plus an unsigned envelope I had been planning to give them for $36,300. More. What was the load path? The load path was me. The entire wedding, the cake, the flowers, the dress, the venue, the photographer, the bar, was structurally dependent on my generosity. What happened if I removed myself? I did not yet know, but I had been planning for 3 weeks to find out. I had decided, by the morning of September 7th, that I would attend the wedding. I would attend it because Andrew was my son. I would attend it because Charles had set aside the money for this day. I would attend it with grace and dignity, and without comment about whatever rearrangements had been quietly made about my role. I would attend the wedding. I would see what happened. And then I would decide what to do about the unsigned envelope in my purse. The wedding was at the Lyndhurst Hotel in downtown Cincinnati on Saturday, September 7th, 2024. I drove down from Indianapolis on Friday afternoon. I had a room at the Lyndhurst, a small room on the 6th floor that I had booked myself because the bridal party had taken the larger suites, and I had been told, in July, that there were no rooms available in the block. I had checked into the hotel at 4 p.m. on Friday. The rehearsal dinner, the dinner I had paid for in full in June, had started at 6. I had not attended it. I had not attended it because I had not been invited. Andrew had called me at 3 on Friday and told me apologetically, in a voice that suggested Lauren had been listening, that given the small space and the wedding party focus, it would be better if I had dinner in the hotel restaurant on my own. I had said, "Of course, sweetheart. I will see you at the wedding tomorrow." I had eaten dinner alone at the hotel restaurant. I had a small salad and a glass of red wine. I had brought my book, a small biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. I had been reading slowly for 2 weeks. I had read for an hour and a half at the table. I had paid my own bill. I had gone back to my room at 8:30. I had been calm. I had been calm because I had decided, on the drive down, that I was not going to be the woman who made a scene at her son's wedding. I had been less calm at 10 p.m. when I opened the small envelope I had brought with me, the one with the check inside, and looked at it again. $36,300. I had stared at the check for a long time. I had thought about the rehearsal dinner I had not been invited to. I had thought about the small room on the 6th floor I had been given, because there were no rooms available in the block. I had thought about Vivian, who I knew from a small comment Andrew had made in July had been given the bridal suite on the 20th floor for free as part of the block. I had folded the check. I had put it back in my purse. I had gone to sleep at 11. I had slept the way a woman sleeps when she has, in the back of her mind, already made a decision, but is waiting for one more piece of evidence to confirm it. The wedding was at 3 p.m. on Saturday. I dressed at 1. I had bought a new dress for the occasion, a soft burgundy chiffon with a high collar and 3/4 sleeves. I had paid $420 for the dress, plus $80 for alterations. I had bought a small fascinator to match. I had spent 45 minutes on my hair. I had worn the pearl earrings Charles had given me on our 30th anniversary. I had gone downstairs at 2:30. The wedding ceremony was being held in the hotel's main ballroom, which had been set up for 240 guests. The reception would follow in the same room after a 15-minute reset. The cocktail hour was being held in the adjacent lobby bar. I had walked into the main lobby of the hotel at 2:33 p.m. I had been intending to find the seating chart. I had been intending to find my assigned seat. I had been intending, perhaps, to find Andrew and to wish him well before the ceremony began. I had walked across the marble floor toward the entrance of the ballroom. Andrew had been standing at the top of the staircase that led down into the lobby. He had been in his tuxedo. He had seen me. He had come down the stairs quickly. He had crossed the marble floor toward me. He had stopped about 10 feet away. He had said very quietly, "Mom, listen. I need to ask you something, and I am so sorry I am asking it now." I had said, "Sweetheart, what is it?" He had said, "Mom, Lauren has been very stressed all morning. Her mother has been. They have been talking. And Lauren, she has asked. She has asked if maybe you could not come into the ceremony itself. She wants to keep it to immediate family on her side and the wedding party only. Her mother, Vivian is going to walk her down the aisle. She doesn't want She doesn't want extra family there for the ceremony part. She thinks it will throw her off. I had stood very still. I had looked at my son. I had said, very calmly, "Sweetheart, could you say that again, please? I want to make sure I heard you correctly." He had said, "Mom, I am so sorry Lauren is asking if you could maybe wait in the lobby during the ceremony, just for the ceremony. You would come in for the reception. Just, not the ceremony itself. She, she has been having anxiety all morning. She thinks if too many people are there during the vows, she'll lose it." I had not said anything for approximately 12 seconds. I want to tell you what I saw in those 12 seconds. I saw, across the lobby, Vivian, Lauren's mother. She was in a soft, champagne-coloured dress that I would later learn cost $2,800 and had been chosen specifically so that it would not visually clash with anything in the bridal party. She was smiling at someone. She was holding a glass of champagne. She was being congratulated by a small cluster of Lauren's relatives. I saw, near the door to the ballroom, the seating chart. It was a large framed board on an easel. I could see my name on it from where I stood. It was in the bottom right corner of the board, table 16. I noticed that table 16 was by the geometry of the ballroom, the table closest to the kitchen doors. I saw, behind Vivian, 3 of Lauren's bridesmaids. They were laughing about something. They were not looking at me. I saw my son, Andrew, who was 38 years old, who had been my child for 38 years, who had been raised by Charles to be the kind of man who said we have enough, and who had stopped saying it somewhere around 2014, standing 10 feet away from me in his tuxedo, asking me on the morning of his own wedding, paid for by me, in a hotel lobby in front of the seating chart that had placed me at the table closest to the kitchen doors, not to attend the ceremony. I noticed all of it. Then I looked at Andrew. I said, very calmly, "Sweetheart, of course, I understand. I will wait in the lobby. I hope the ceremony is everything Lauren wants it to be." His face had relaxed. He had said, "Mom, thank you so much. I will see you at the reception. I love you." I had said, "I love you too, sweetheart. Go get married." He had hugged me, briefly. He had walked back across the lobby. He had gone up the stairs. He had disappeared into the ballroom. I had stood in the lobby for a moment. I had looked at the seating chart one more time. Then I had walked across the marble floor. I had walked past the seating chart. I had walked past the doors of the ballroom. I had walked across the lobby and out the front entrance of the Lyndhurst Hotel. I had not attended the ceremony. I had not attended the reception either. I did not, however, drive home that afternoon. I want to tell you what I did instead. I walked 1 block south of the hotel to a small coffee shop I had noticed the previous day. I ordered a cup of black coffee and a small slice of lemon cake. I sat at a window table. I drank the coffee. I ate the cake. I watched, through the window, the small life of a downtown Cincinnati Saturday afternoon. 2 women walking a Labrador, a couple in their 30s arguing gently about which restaurant to go to for dinner, a teenage boy practicing kickflips on a skateboard in front of the parking garage across the street. I sat in the coffee shop for 2.5 hours. I did not cry. I thought about Charles. I thought about the wedding I had not attended. I thought about Vivian, in her $2,800 dress, walking my son's bride down the aisle, while the cake I had paid for sat on a table in the next room. I thought about the $36,300 in my purse. At 5:30 p.m., I walked back to the Lyndhurst Hotel. I went to my room on the 6th floor. I packed my suitcase. I drove home to Indianapolis. I arrived at 9:15 p.m. I did not call Andrew. I did not call Lauren. I let the wedding happen without me. I want to tell you that this was the hardest thing I have ever done. I want to tell you that I sat in my own kitchen at 10 p.m. with a glass of water and stared at a photograph of Andrew, age 6, with chocolate cake on his face that hung on the small bulletin board by my refrigerator. I want to tell you that I considered, several times in the next hour, calling Andrew and saying, "Sweetheart, this is your wedding day. I am sorry I left. Please tell me you are happy." I did not call him. I went to bed at 11:30. I slept the way a woman sleeps when she has, on her son's wedding day, made a decision that cannot be undone. On Sunday morning at 8 a.m., my phone rang. It was Andrew. I let it ring 3 times. I answered. "Mom." "Sweetheart." A long pause. "Mom, you weren't at the reception. People kept asking where you were." "Lauren." "Lauren said you must have left early." "Mom, where are you?" I said, "Sweetheart, I am at home, in Indianapolis. I drove home yesterday afternoon." He said, You drove home? Why?" I said, "Sweetheart, because after you asked me to wait in the lobby during the ceremony, I decided that if my presence was something that could be rearranged on the morning of your wedding by your wife and her mother, then my presence at the rest of the evening was probably also something that could be rearranged. I decided to remove the load before someone else removed it for me. I drove home." A long silence. He said, Mom, that's not what Lauren." I said, "Sweetheart, stop. I am going to tell you what is going to happen now. I am going to be very clear. Listen carefully." He stopped. I said, "The check I had been planning to give you and Lauren at the reception, the check for $36,300, which was the remainder of the $100,000 gift your father set aside in 2018, is not being given to you. The check is being voided. The funds are being redirected. The redirection happens tomorrow morning at 9. When I call my lawyer, he said, Mom, please." I said, "Andrew, I have not finished." He stopped. I said, "The funds are going to be redirected to a trust in your father's name. The trust will fund a scholarship at the high school where your father taught for the first 12 years of his career, the high school he loved most before he moved into administration. The scholarship will be awarded annually, in his name, to a graduating senior who is the first in their family to attend college. It will be $10,000 a year for 3 years and $6,000 for the fourth. The math works out almost exactly to $36,300. The first scholarship will be awarded next May." He said, very quietly, "Mom, the scholarship." I said, "Your father always wanted to do something like this in his lifetime. He never quite got around to it. He had been planning to talk to his old school about it when he retired in 2014. Then he started his consulting work. Then he got sick. He never did it. The wedding gift account has been sitting in his name since 2018. The check I was going to give you and Lauren yesterday was going to be the last piece of it. Yesterday morning in a hotel lobby in Cincinnati, you and Lauren, without knowing it, decided that the last piece of that money was not going to your wedding. It is going, instead, to where your father would have put it if he had lived another 5 years." A long silence on the line. Then Andrew said, "Mom, the scholarship." I said, "Yes, sweetheart." He said, "Mom, Dad would have loved that." I said, "I know he would have. That is why I am doing it." A longer silence. Then he said, very quietly, "Mom, I am so sorry." I said, "Sweetheart, I know you are. The relationship between you and me will continue. The relationship between me and Lauren will not. The check has been redirected. The wedding has happened. Your father has been honored. The next chapter is yours and Lauren's to figure out. I will not be at any of your events for 1 year. After 1 year, if you would like to have lunch with me, alone, at my house, I will cook pot roast. We will see what we have to talk about." He was crying. I let him cry. After a while, he said, "Mom, the scholarship. Can I help with it? Can I be on the committee? Can I be part of choosing who gets it?" I sat with that question for a moment. Then I said, "Sweetheart, yes, you can. The first year, the committee will be me, the school principal, and one teacher. After that, if you would like to join the committee, you may. I would like that. He said, "Thank you, Mom. I love you." I said, "I love you too, sweetheart. Go take care of your wife. Tell her I wish her well. Tell her I will not be in contact for 1 year. Tell her if she chooses to write me a letter sometime in the next year, I will read it. I will not necessarily respond, but I will read it." We hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I did not cry. I made myself a second cup of coffee. I called my lawyer, Helen Walsh, at 9:15 the next morning. I told her what had happened. She listened to the entire story without interrupting. When I had finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Susan, Charles wrote you a letter in November of 2018. I have been holding it in my office safe for 5 years and 10 months. I think Monday morning is the morning I bring it to your house." She arrived at 10:30. She brought a leather portfolio. She brought a notary. We sat at my kitchen table. She slid an envelope across the table. The envelope was cream-coloured. Charles's handwriting on the front. "Susan, for the day the wedding gift becomes something else." I broke the seal. I read, "Susan, if you are reading this, something has happened with the wedding gift I set aside this year. I am sorry I am not there. I am writing this in November of 2018. I do not yet know I am sick. I am writing it because I have been thinking about the gift for several weeks, and I want you to know, in case anything happens to me, that the gift was not meant to be a wedding fund. It was meant to be a gift to Andrew, to use for his life. If the woman he marries one day turns out to be a woman who treats my gift as a wedding budget, if she spends it on a wedding instead of on a life, I want you to redirect what is left to something. That matters more. The scholarship is the obvious choice. Helen has the paperwork drafted. The trust is ready. You can move it on the morning you call her. Susan, I have always trusted Andrew to choose someone good. I have not always trusted Andrew to choose someone for the right reasons. He is a sweet boy and a vulnerable man. If he marries someone who looks at our gift the way I am afraid she might, you will know. You will know by how she treats you in the months leading up to the wedding. If she treats you well, do not touch the trust paperwork. If she treats you badly, the paperwork is here. You will know which she did. You always know. I love you. The scholarship was always the alternative. It is named for me. I would be honored. Charles. I read the letter twice. I did not cry. I set it down on the kitchen table. I looked at Helen. I said, "Helen." "He thought of the scholarship." She said, "He thought of the scholarship, Susan." In November of 2018, 4 months before he knew he was sick, he named it. He drafted the bylaws. He chose the school. The principal at the school has been on standby since 2019. I said, "Helen, let us begin." We worked at my kitchen table for 2 hours. I signed the trust documents. I signed the irrevocable assignment of the remaining $36,300 to the Charles Whitfield Memorial Scholarship Fund. I signed the bylaws. The notary stamped each document. By noon on Monday, the scholarship existed. The first award would be given the following May to a graduating senior who was the first in their family to attend college. The principal of Charles's old high school called me on Monday afternoon at 3. She said, "Susan, Helen just called. I cannot thank you enough. Charles was the best teacher I ever worked with. Before he became an administrator, the students still talk about him. There are alumni in their 50s who still remember him. I am so honored to host this scholarship in his name." I said, "Margaret, that is what your name is, isn't it? Margaret. Charles would have liked that you are still principal. He would have liked that the scholarship is in good hands." She said, "Susan, I will treat it like the gift it is." We hung up. I sat at the kitchen table. I poured myself a small glass of red wine. It was 3:30 in the afternoon on a Monday in early September. I had attended part of my son's wedding. I had paid for $63,700 of it. I had walked out of the hotel before the ceremony. I had redirected the rest of the gift to a scholarship in my husband's name. I had not cried since Saturday morning. I picked up the small notebook I had started keeping the morning after Andrew's phone call. I wrote one line. I paid for the cake, the flowers, the dress. Then my son asked me not to come inside. So I walked out of the hotel and called my lawyer on Monday morning, and I learned, at 70, that the most generous thing my husband ever did for me was the morning in November of 2018 when he drafted, in a lawyer's office, the bylaws for a scholarship that would honor him on a day he did not yet know would be a day his son's wife stole the rest of his wedding gift. Sometimes dignity does not arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in a coffee shop, 1 block from the wedding you were not invited to attend, with a slice of lemon cake and an unsigned check in your purse. I closed the notebook. I poured the last of my wine. The scholarship existed now. Charles had always wanted it. The wedding gift account was empty. The trust was full. The next chapter belonged to Andrew and Lauren. I had taken the rest with me.